The ocean had always been their livelihood, their curse, and their home. On a humid September night, the silver current rocked gently in the dark waters off Guam, its deck glowing under lantern light. The crew of 6 men moved with the quiet rhythm of people who had worked the same nets, the same lines, for decades. Laughter rose, mingling with the splash of fish and the creak of old wood. Captain Rafael "Rafe" Castillo stood at the bow, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the stars. He was a man carved by salt and sun, respected by the younger fishermen, feared in bar fights, and still haunted by debts he couldn't pay. Tonight, his thoughts were divided, half on the catch, half on the creditors who might soon come knocking at his door. "Big haul tonight," muttered Mateo, the eldest, his hands trembling from years of arthritis. He wore a crucifix that gleamed when the lantern caught it. "The sea owes us a gift. I can feel it." "You always feel something," laughed Luis, the youngest of the crew, not more than 22. "Last time it was the ghost of a whale. Turned out to be a log." The others chuckled, but Mateo crossed himself. "Mock me, Niño, but I heard it from the village priest. There are places we should not fish, waters where the sea sings to itself. Those who trespass are swallowed." His words lingered, an omen left hanging in the humid night air. By midnight, the nets were heavy with tuna, glinting silver under the deck lights. Spirits rose, even Mateo smiled. That was when the wind shifted. It came not as a gradual warning, but as a knife through calm waters. One moment the sea was glass, the next it rose in sudden fury. Clouds rolled in from the east, blacker than tar, devouring the stars. Lightning licked the horizon like the tongue of some monstrous thing. "Storm's coming fast," Captain Rafe barked, his voice sharp. "Reel it in, all of it. Secure the lines." The men scrambled, pulling nets, shouting over the wind. Rain fell in sheets, each drop stinging like needles. The silver current groaned as waves slapped its hull, climbing higher, each strike like a cannon blast. The radio crackled as Rafe twisted the dial. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Silver Current. Position." A burst of static cut him off, the signal swallowed by the storm. The boat pitched violently, sending Luis sprawling across the deck. He screamed as seawater crashed over him. Mateo clung to his crucifix, lips moving in frantic prayer. It was more than a storm. It was a wall of wind and water, unnatural in its suddenness. The sea didn't feel wild, it felt angry. A towering wave, higher than the mast, surged from the blackness. It lifted the silver current like a toy, tilting it skyward before slamming it down with bone-shattering force. The hull cracked. The lanterns shattered. Darkness swallowed everything. "Abandon ship!" Rafe roared, though he knew there was nowhere to go. The lifeboats were already torn away. The ocean had them now. Water flooded the deck, rising past their knees, then their waists. The men clung to whatever they could. Luis's cries became gurgles as the sea claimed him. Others vanished in the chaos, dragged under by nets and rigging. And then came the pull. Not the pull of the tide or the suck of a sinking hull, but a downward current, steady and deliberate. It was as if unseen hands gripped the silver current and dragged it beneath the waves. Rafe felt it. That wrongness. The sea was not just swallowing them, it was taking them somewhere. The surface vanished in seconds. Above them, lightning still flickered, a faint memory growing dim. Pressure tightened around their skulls. The wood shrieked as nails popped from the hull. Air bubbles spiraled like lost prayers. And yet, they were not crushed. Not shattered instantly, as every sailor feared the deep would do. Instead, the boat groaned but held, as though the abyss itself wanted it intact. Mateo opened his eyes underwater, his crucifix floating in front of his face. He thought he saw movement in the black, lights, faint and shimmering far below, like candles glowing on the ocean floor. When the crew finally broke through the surface inside a flooded hold, coughing brine and blood, they realized the impossible. They were still alive, but sinking deeper every second. The silver current, crippled yet intact, was being carried like an offering into the trenches. And as the storm above raged unseen, beneath the waves there was only silence, except for a sound, low at first, almost mistaken for the groan of timber, a vibration through the water, deep and resonant. Not wind, not metal, not anything the men had ever known. A hum, a choir with no words rising from below. The last thing Captain Rafe heard before unconsciousness claimed him was that sound, threading through his bones like a lullaby too ancient for men to remember. And the sea kept pulling them down. When consciousness returned, it came in fragments. Captain Rafe opened his eyes to a world of fractured light. The silver current's hull had split, and beams from shattered lanterns flickered dimly in the black water like dying stars. He lay half submerged in a tilted chamber of the wreck, his lungs burning with each ragged breath. Captain?" The voice was hoarse, trembling. "Luis." Against all odds, the boy clung to a section of the ceiling, his knuckles white. Beside him, Mateo sat in an air pocket, his crucifix pressed so tight to his chest the metal had cut his skin. Others stirred in the shadows. Tomas, his leg twisted unnaturally, and Javier, coughing salt water from his lungs. 4 survivors, out of 6. They should have been dead. At this depth, the ocean should have crushed the hull like an egg. Yet the wreck held. The pressure felt heavy, oppressive, but not fatal, as if some unseen force cradled them, keeping the sea's fury at bay. It was silent, unnaturally so. Only their gasps, the groan of warped wood, and the faint hum. That sound again. It vibrated through the metal frame, a resonance that made their teeth ache. Low, endless, not mechanical, but alive, like the deep breathing of something vast and unseen. "What is that?" Luis whispered, eyes darting. "The trench," Mateo muttered, rocking back and forth. "I warned you. We've crossed into cursed waters. The sea sings for the dead." "Enough with your superstitions," Rafe snapped, though his voice was weaker than he wanted. He wanted reason, but reason had no place here. Through a jagged opening in the hull, light shimmered. Not lantern light, something far stranger. Rafe pulled himself toward it, each movement heavy as though the water itself resisted him. He peered through the gap, and his breath caught. The silver current rested against a slope of the trench, but not in darkness. The seabed glowed faintly, bathed in ghostly light from swaying colonies of tube worms, pale, blood-red tipped towers rising like organ pipes from the methane seeps. White clams the size of helmets clustered along cracks, while mats of bacteria glowed with an eerie bioluminescence, painting the abyss in blues and greens. It was beautiful, terrible, alien. The others crawled to see. Luis gasped, his face pressed against the jagged edge. "It's like another world." "Not another world," Mateo whispered. "Another kingdom." They stared in silence, mesmerized until the hum returned, deeper this time. It didn't echo like sound should. It pressed against their ribs, wormed into their skulls. Then Tomas screamed. "My leg! It's moving!" he cried, thrashing in pain. Rafe grabbed him, but the man's eyes were wide, pupils dilated. No, someone's out there." Through the shimmering vent plumes, shadows drifted. At first, they looked like distortions in the light, the wavering mirage of heat. But as the current shifted, Rafe swore he saw form. Elongated limbs, hair streaming upward like dark seaweed, faces pale and hollow-eyed. They swayed in rhythm with the methane vents, as though the hum belonged to them. Luis whimpered, covering his ears. "It's voices. They're singing." Rafe clenched his jaw. "It's gas. Hallucinations. The methane's getting to us." But, even as he spoke, he felt it. A pull, not physical but inside him, a strange resonance with the song. Images flickered in his mind. His daughter, the one he hadn't seen in months, standing on a shore, calling for him. He smelled her hair, heard her laughter. "Stop," he muttered, shaking his head. "It's not real." Matteo's lips moved, whispering in time with the hum. His crucifix swayed as though caught in a current, though the air was still. His eyes were wide and wet, filled with both terror and reverence. "They're calling," he said softly. "The choir of the deep. I told you. The drowned don't rest here. They sing." The wreck groaned, a long metallic wail that seemed almost like an answer. A rivulet of seawater streamed in through a new crack. The hull wouldn't last. "We need to move," Rafe ordered, gripping Luis's arm. "Find another air pocket, something. If we stay, we drown." "But out there," Luis stammered, staring at the wavering shadows. "Out there is death," Rafe barked. Yet even as he said it, the light beyond pulsed, brighter, rhythmic, almost beckoning. The men hesitated. Fear chained them. Awe rooted them. And then came the sound that broke them. A single note, higher than the rest, rising from the abyss like a scream frozen in song. It cut through their skulls, leaving silence in its wake. Then movement. Through the methane plumes a figure drifted closer. Pale, human-shaped, but too tall, too thin, its arms stretching like tendrils. Its mouth opened, not in words, not in breath, but in perfect harmony with the hum. Matteo fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "Mother of God, they've chosen us." Rafe's heart hammered. He wanted to shout, to deny it, but the sound swelled again, drowning reason. The sea itself was singing, and it was singing to them. The silence after the song was worse than the song itself. Captain Rafe forced himself to breathe steadily, though each inhale tasted of rust and rot. Around him, the wrecked chamber creaked like a coffin shifting under earth. Water trickled through widening seams. Their time inside the silver current was dwindling. "We can't stay," he said, forcing command into his voice. "The hull's failing. We move now." Luis nodded shakily, but his eyes lingered on the glowing abyss outside. Matteo still knelt, lips murmuring silent prayers that sounded more like echoes of the hum. Tomas groaned, his mangled legs swelling, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold. The shadowy figure had vanished back into the plumes, but its presence lingered. Rafe felt it under his skin, like the sting of a half-remembered dream. "Cap," Luis whispered, "what if there's no way up? What if the sea doesn't let us leave?" Rafe tightened his grip on the boy's shoulder. "Then we carve a way through, understand?" Luis nodded again, though his face betrayed doubt. They pried loose a broken panel, wriggling through into the cold dark. Water closed around them, biting and endless. Miraculously, pockets of breathable air clung to the wreck's underside, trapped in warped metal cavities. It bought them minutes, maybe hours. No more. Outside, the trench revealed itself in full. The seabed stretched like a cathedral floor, sloping downward into infinite black. Towering white tube worms rose in forests, their crimson plumes swaying though no current touched them. Vast clams gaped open, glowing faintly from colonies of bacteria within. Patches of glimmering mats covered the ground like carpets, exhaling shimmering bubbles of methane. The hum pulsed through it all, not constant now, but rhythmic. A strange cadence that seemed tied to the venting gas. Each exhalation of bubbles produced a note, and together they wove into an endless, unearthly harmony. "The Methane Choir," Matteo whispered, awestruck. "This is their temple." Rafe ignored him. He had no patience for visions dressed as faith. Yet even he couldn't deny the majesty. The way the vents exhaled like organs in some colossal instrument, how the worms swayed in perfect rhythm, how the light itself seemed to pulse with sound. It was alive. The trench was alive. They staggered across the seabed, clinging to fragments of wood for buoyancy. Every step was a battle. The water thick, the pressure crushing, their bodies screaming for air. Then came the movement. From between the worm towers more figures drifted. Pale and elongated, their motions graceful, almost deliberate. Not fish, not human. Something in between, shadows molded by the abyss. Their mouths opened in silence, but the hum deepened, resonant, as though the newcomers had joined the chorus. Luis's teeth chattered. "They're following us?" "No," Matteo said softly, his eyes glinting with fever. "They're guiding us." Rafe cursed under his breath. He wanted to drag Matteo forward, but Tomas's leg gave way, sending him crumpling to the glowing mats. As his body struck the bacterial carpet, a burst of bubbles escaped, and the choir's song changed. The resonance shifted, higher, urgent, vibrating through their bones. The shadows closed in. Rafe hauled Thomas up, but the man screamed, clutching his head. Blood trickled from his ears. "The song! It's inside me," Thomas wailed. His body convulsed, limbs spasming in rhythm with the vent pulses. Luis tried to pull him free, but Rafe saw it in Tomas's eyes. He wasn't looking at them anymore. He was seeing something else. His lips moved, repeating words none of them could hear, his voice drowned by the abyss. And then he went still. Tomas rose, not with his own strength, but buoyed by the bubbles streaming from the mat. His body floated upright, limbs loose, yet his eyes were open, glowing faintly with reflected light. He joined the choir. The figures encircled him, their pale shapes swaying in unison. Tomas's body mirrored them perfectly, moving as though it had always belonged. Luis screamed, thrashing in the water. "We can't leave him." "He's gone," Rafe barked, though his throat ached to admit it. "If we stay, we'll follow him." Luis fought against him, sobbing. Matteo didn't move, only stared with rapture as if witnessing holy ascension. The song swelled again, deafening, vibrating through marrow. Rafe felt his vision blur, shapes twisting into memories. His daughter on the shore again, calling him, reaching with hands that weren't hers. He slapped himself, hard, forcing reality back. "Move!" he roared, dragging Luis and shaking Matteo from his trance. "We head down slope, away from this cursed place." "Down!" Luis cried. "We should go up, toward the surface." Rafe's gaze lifted. Above them was only black, endless and crushing. Their wreck sat too deep, too broken. Without air, without sails, without a miracle, they'd never breach the miles of ocean pressing overhead. But below, the slope beckoned. He couldn't explain why, but he felt it. The choir was hurting them, yes, but the trench itself was pulling them. The hum wasn't just sound, it was direction. "We follow the current," Rafe said coldly. "It's our only chance." Luis's face twisted with terror, but he obeyed. Matteo followed too, though with something like devotion rather than fear. Behind them, Tomas drifted farther into the methane gardens, swallowed by the pale choir of the abyss. The song rose, a hymn to the deep, and the three who remained staggered downward into the black heart of the trench. The deeper they went, the more the trench seemed to breathe. Every vent exhaled in rhythm, plumes of methane bubbling upward like incense smoke in a sunken cathedral. The seabed sloped into a vast canyon, its walls pulsing with faint phosphorescence. The song was no longer background. It was everywhere, threading through marrow and thought, erasing the thin line between sound and soul. Luis clung to Rafe's side, his eyes wide with panic. Matteo, by contrast, seemed calmer than ever. The man's lips moved constantly, repeating fragments of the choir's melody as if he were learning a forgotten prayer. "Stop muttering," Rafe snapped, dragging them forward. His own chest ached, lungs screaming, but his will remained iron. "You sing with them, and you're lost." Matteo only smiled faintly. "Maybe that's the only way home, Captain." Before Rafe could answer, the current shifted. Warmth brushed past their skin. Impossible warmth, as though the trench itself exhaled. The water shimmered ahead, a heat haze rippling across the abyss. And then they saw it. At the canyon center stood a structure, impossible and undeniable. Columns of black basalt rose in spirals, entwined with forests of tube worms. Glowing mats carpeted the base, exhaling endless streams of bubbles that carried the song upward. It was no accident of geology. It was an altar. Luis choked. That's built. That's not natural. Rafe's stomach turned. The columns had symmetry, intention, the unmistakable imprint of hands, or something like hands. The choir was not merely a trick of sound and current. Someone, or something, had raised this cathedral in the dark. Shadows stirred around the altar. Figures, dozens, maybe hundreds, rose with the bubbles, drifting upward like dancers caught in slow motion. Their bodies were elongated, translucent, faces blank yet expressive in some unfathomable way. The hum deepened as they approached, and Rafe's skull felt as though it might crack under the pressure of song. Luis clutched his ears. "Make it stop!" But Matteo sank to his knees on the seabed, arms outstretched. "Don't you see? They're welcoming us." The figures circled closer. Their movements were graceful, hypnotic, each one swaying in time with the methane plumes. And then Rafe saw, among them floated Thomas. His body no longer looked broken. His leg hung straight, his face serene, his eyes glowing faintly with the altar's light. He moved as if he had always belonged among them. Luis sobbed. "Tomas!" The shadows reached for them. Rafe drew the rusted shard of metal he had salvaged from the wreck. A useless blade against the sea, but it steadied his hands. "Stay back," he growled, though the water swallowed his voice. The choir didn't falter. Their song surged, vibrating through the basalt, through flesh, through thought. Rafe staggered, vision fracturing. He saw the shore again, his daughter's face shimmering in the black. Not distorted this time, but clear. Perfect. She was smiling. "Come home, Papa." He almost reached for her. Almost. Then pain stabbed his palm. Luis had grabbed his hand, nails digging deep. The boy's eyes were terrified, pleading. That simple human touch tore through the illusion like a blade. The vision cracked. His daughter dissolved into bubbles. Rafe shook free of the trance with a roar, dragging Luis backward. But Matteo refused to move. He stepped forward, toward the altar, his eyes shining with devotion. "This is salvation," Matteo whispered. "Don't fight it. Listen." The choir swelled, their harmony weaving tighter. The methane bubbles spiraled upward, encircling Matteo like a crown. He lifted his arms, face rapturous, and the shadows enfolded him. For a heartbeat, Rafe saw the man's outline dissolve into theirs, his flesh shifting, elongating, his features melting into translucence. Matteo didn't scream. He sang, and the choir embraced him. Luis thrashed, panicked. "He's gone! He's gone just like Thomas!" Rafe held him fast, heart pounding. 2 men lost. 2 claimed. The altar pulsed. A vibration rolled outward, stronger than anything before. The canyon floor shook, releasing clouds of shimmering bubbles. The choir rose higher, their hymn building toward a crescendo that threatened to shatter bone. Rafe realized the truth in a flash of clarity. The song wasn't random. It was summoning. The vent, the altar, the shadows, all of it was a beacon, a call into the abyss. And they were next. "Luis," Rafe rasped, forcing calm into his voice despite the terror flooding him. "We can't stay. If we do, the sea takes us. Do you understand?" Luis nodded frantically, tears streaming in the salt water. Rafe scanned the canyon. There, a fissure in the basalt wall, narrow but leading away from the altar's glow. A chance. He pulled Luis with him, staggering across the trembling seabed. Every step fought the choir's pull. The song clawed at their thoughts, promising peace, reunion, eternity. Shadows drifted to block their path, faces blank yet beckoning. Rafe slashed with his shard. The blade tore through nothing but water, yet the gesture broke their formation, enough for him to drag Luis onward. Behind them, Mateo's voice rose above the choir, no longer human, but vast, resonant, part of the abyss itself. The canyon thundered with music. The fissure loomed closer. Rafe prayed the rock would shelter them from the sound, that beyond lay darkness without song. He had no way of knowing if escape was even possible, but he knew this: stay, and they would be swallowed whole, their souls added to the choir. He gritted his teeth, pulled Luis into the crack, and plunged into the black unknown. The fissure closed behind them like a stone throat swallowing its prey. Rafe dragged Luis deeper, away from the trembling canyon floor and the unbearable crescendo of the choir. The crack was narrow, jagged, forcing them to scrape shoulders against basalt walls coated in slime and pale growths. The glow of the altar faded, but the song did not vanish. It shifted. In the darkness, the melody became thinner, higher, like whispers in glass pipes. Each note ricocheted off the fissure's walls, creating the illusion that voices pressed in from all directions. Luis gasped, clinging to Rafe's arm. "They're following us. I can hear them." Rafe steadied the boy, though his own heart pounded hard enough to fracture ribs. "Keep moving. Don't listen. The song can kill us if we don't give it space in our heads." But the fissure seemed endless. The current tugged at them, drawing them downward rather than out. Rafe realized with mounting dread that this was no escape tunnel. It was a vein, leading deeper into the trench's hidden body. The water thickened. Bubbles shimmered like silver threads around them, rising from vents hidden in the rock. Rafe brushed one and flinched at the burn. The bubbles weren't air. They were pure methane, seeping upward like the trench's breath. The whispers twisted. Voices rose within the song, clearer now, syllables threading into something almost human. Rafe tried to shut it out, but one word pressed against his skull until it seared. "Raphael?" He froze. The sound had not come from Luis. It had been sung in his dead wife's voice. Luis noticed his hesitation. "What is it? What's wrong?" "Nothing," Rafe lied, forcing his limbs forward. "Just keep swimming." But the fissure knew his name. As they descended, the walls widened. The fissure opened into a cavern so vast it defied sense, its ceiling lost in black. Methane plumes spiraled upward from cracks in the floor, painting ghostly columns that bent with the currents. Between them floated skeletons. Not fish, not whale, but human. Dozens of bodies suspended in eternal drift, their bones etched with faint patterns as if carved by careful hands. Luis's teeth chattered. How did they get here? Rafe couldn't answer. He had no words for the impossible tableau. The choir returned in force. Not the harmonious hymn of the altar, but something more fragmented, broken, as if the cavern itself echoed with the voices of those long dead. Each skeleton seemed to sing through hollow ribs, the notes rattling through bone. The methane flames of memory ignited. Rafe saw faces in the bones, shipmates from decades of voyages, men he had buried at sea. He saw his wife standing at the cavern's far edge, her hair drifting like kelp, her arms open wide. He almost let go of Luis, almost. But the boy squeezed his wrist, pulling him back. "Captain, don't leave me, please." The plea cut through the hallucination like a blade. Rafe blinked and the image shattered. The skeletons were just skeletons again. His wife was gone. The choir shifted pitch, angry now, as though the abyss resented being denied. The methane plumes surged higher, bubbles colliding in bursts that rang like bells. The entire cavern trembled, dust raining from unseen heights. Luis pointed, panic rising. "There! Light!" Rafe followed his gaze. Across the cavern, past the forest of skeletons, a faint glow seeped from a tunnel mouth. Not the golden glow of the altar. This was pale, cold, like starlight swallowed by water. Hope flickered. "Move," Rafe commanded. They threaded between bones, careful not to disturb them. Yet the skeletons seemed to stir anyway, their jaws parting, their limbs swaying in the current. And with every shift, the song grew louder. Halfway across, Luis faltered. A skeleton had snagged his sleeve with a finger bent like a hook. He kicked, panicked, and the bone came loose, floating upward, still pointing at him like an accusation. The cavern roared. The choir's fragments aligned, snapping into harmony again, thunderous and consuming. From the cavern floor, shapes began to rise. Not translucent figures this time, but shadows heavier than water, clothed in darkness so thick it bent the methane glow. They rose from the cracks, faceless, featureless, yet filled with unbearable presence. Luis whimpered, "Not again. Not them again." Rafe gritted his teeth, pulling him free. "Keep your eyes on the light. That's all that's real." The shadows pursued, their movements matching the song's rhythm. Each note drove them closer. The cavern shook with their arrival, as though the choir had called its true children. Rafe shoved Luis ahead. "Swim!" They tore through the final stretch, the light widening into a tunnel rim. The shadows closed, long arms reaching, fingers like currents that threatened to drag them back into the skeleton forest. Rafe's lungs burned, his muscles screamed. Then they burst through. The tunnel swallowed them, narrow again, cutting the song in half. Behind them the cavern raged with echoes, but distance dulled the hymn. The figures did not follow. The glow ahead brightened, strange and cold, painting their faces in pale blue. Luis gasped, "We made it!" But Rafe felt no relief. The light wasn't salvation, it was too steady, too intentional. And as they swam closer, he saw the source. Embedded in the tunnel wall was a shard of metal larger than a house, rusted yet intact, etched with letters he could barely decipher through corrosion. He brushed away silt, and his heart stopped. It was no natural cavern. It was a graveyard, and this shard was a piece of a ship, a vessel lost to history, entombed in the trench. The name surfaced beneath his trembling fingers, USS Valkyrie, and the choir sang louder, as if the ship itself had been waiting. For the first time since the storm, Rafe and Luis could no longer hear the choir's thunder. Only a hollow stillness pressed around them, so complete it made their ears ache. The pale light emanated from the wreck's hull, seeping through cracked steel seams like breath escaping from a dying lung. They drifted toward the carcass of the USS Valkyrie, its jagged edges looming like cathedral spires. Once a proud warship, it now slept entombed beneath miles of water and darkness, yet its presence was colossal, a reminder that the trench did not merely devour life, it hoarded history. Luis's voice trembled in the comms. Why is it glowing?" Rafe touched the metal. Cold radiated through his gloves. He traced the fractures, the rust, the barnacles clinging like tumors, and beneath it all pulsed a rhythm, slow, deliberate, like a heart beating beneath steel. "The choir," Rafe whispered. "It's inside." The ship's cracked hull yawned open, inviting them in. Against every instinct, Rafe led Luis through. Inside, the Valkyrie was not empty. Shadows lingered in corridors warped by pressure. Figures in decayed uniforms, their helmets shattered, faces long gone. Yet they stood as though awaiting orders. As the divers passed, each figure lifted its head in eerie unison, sockets tracking them, silent. Luis clutched Rafe's arm. "They're watching us. Keep moving." They reached the command deck. There, at the heart of the Valkyrie, stood a console still alive, though no power should exist at such depths. Screens flickered with static, instruments ticked without fuel. And through the broken viewport, methane plumes rose like organ pipes. The vibrations from below resonated against the steel, amplifying until the entire ship hummed with the choir's hymn. Luis covered his ears, but sound had no mercy here. It filled their bodies, vibrating bones, rattling teeth. The melody was no longer distant or beautiful. It was absolute, a language of the abyss itself. Then the shadows of the crew moved. They raised their hands, skeletal fingers pointing toward the console. The static cleared for one instant, revealing words in red across the cracked screen. "Join the song." Luis shook his head violently. No, I don't want this." Rafe's heart hammered. He had spent decades outrunning ghosts, his wife's absence, his crew's deaths, his own regrets. And now, the trench had gathered them all here, demanding surrender. The choir crescendoed, no longer whispers or hymns, but an ocean of voices, human and inhuman, merging into one unstoppable current. The wreck itself trembled. Metal screamed. Luis's mask fogged with tears. "Captain, what do we do?" Rafe looked at the boy, the only living soul he had left. In Luis's eyes he saw raw terror, but also the faintest spark of will. "We don't join," Rafe growled. "We end it." He lunged toward the console. The shadows wailed, the choir twisting into dissonant fury. Methane plumes erupted outside, colliding like explosions. Skeletons rattled within the walls, screaming their protest. Rafe tore free a sparking cable and jammed it into the console. Light flared. The Valkyrie convulsed, its song collapsing into static and shrieks. The choir faltered. For the first time, silence cracked through its perfect harmony. The wreck shuddered. Cracks tore across the hull. Seawater thundered in, sweeping shadows away like smoke in wind. "Go!" Rafe roared, dragging Luis through collapsing corridors. Beams fell, decks twisted, but somehow they reached the hull breach. Behind them, the Valkyrie sank deeper, swallowed into the trench's gut. Its glow faded, and with it the choir dimmed, breaking apart into faint, scattered notes. The last echo lingered in Rafe's ears, his wife's voice, whispering goodbye. Then nothing. They kicked upward, lungs burning, leaving behind bones, shadows, and a wreck that would sing no more. Hours later, they broke surface beneath a torn dawn sky. Their fishing boat was gone, devoured by the storm, but debris bobbed nearby. They clung to the wreckage, gasping, alive. Luis coughed seawater, staring at the horizon. Do you think it's really over?" Rafe turned his gaze back to the trench where the ocean swirled with unnatural calm. He could not answer, for even in the hush of morning, he thought he heard it, just one faint note far below, promising the choir was not dead but merely waiting. And the trench was endless. What do you think? Was the choir silenced, or is it still singing in the darkness of the Mariana Trench? If you felt the pull of the abyss, make sure to subscribe to Terra Uncharted for more tales from the deep. The ocean keeps its secrets well, but together we'll dive until they surface.